This is not going to last forever, as we all know. And the ones who are going to succeed at the outset of this are the ones who are working away furiously like nothing's happening at all. And they're going to be the businesses who are best placed in the industry in 6 to 18 months.
You are listening to the Property Developer Podcast, your home for tips, ideas and inspiration to help take your developing to the next level. Now here's your host, Justin Getty.
Hello and welcome to episode 67 of the show. Thanks for joining me. Today I've got the second of my discussions with people around COVID-19 and what you can be doing to get through this strange period. Today I'm going to be talking with Andy Hoyne. Andy is a past guest on the show. He featured on episode 47 and 48, where we talked about how you can get 100 people lining up to buy into your next property development project. Just before we get into that, here's a very quick update on what I've been up to. I actually this week signed a build contract with the builder, so that's good to get that locked in. I'm just in the process of getting the services abolished for the properties where the site is. That should happen in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll book the demo in for probably 4 to 6 weeks' time, and then we can move on to getting all the initial site works done. So it's an exciting time. Things are starting to happen, which is great. So back to Andy. In this conversation, we talk about the things he thinks you can be doing to keep your projects progressing, things to avoid doing at the moment, and he's also going to provide some ideas on books or movies, documentaries, other content that you can consume when maybe you've got a little bit more time on your hands. Without any further ado, over to Andy.
Andrew Hoyne from the eponymous Hoyne. Welcome back to the show. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
This is a part of a series that I've been doing to inspire people and give them some tips and ideas during this pandemic that's sweeping across the world about what, as property developers, they can be doing in response. So I thought you're a good ideas man, or someone with lots of things that people could be doing. So let's talk to Andy, get him back on the show. But just before we get to that, why don't you give us a bit of a rundown about what you've been doing since we last spoke? I think you've put out a new book, you've been overseas, you're a busy man as usual.
Wow, has it been that long? Our new book came out, it's actually about a year ago now. We've been well into the third volume of The Place Economy. Up until the way the world has changed, I had been doing a lot of travel for work. We're doing a number of pretty exciting projects in other countries, although that's all turned into just a lot of Zoom meetings at this point in time. Thankfully, wherever we are working, we've got a really good sense of what's happening on the ground with those markets. So, we can continue to forge forward with quite a few of those projects. So the downturn's hurting everybody, but, we're pretty optimistic and forging forward. It's just the beauty of having a lot of long-term relationships, I guess.
So what are you finding? I mean, you work with a lot of big developers. What's the sense you've been getting from them about how they're reacting or what they're planning on doing over the next short-term, medium-term and long-term? They're probably continuing on their merry way, but sort of more of the shorter-term stuff.
Look, I think when this hit, everybody stalled everything for a moment. I've found that quite a few of them have gotten things moving again. They might have stalled it for a week or for maybe 3 weeks. But for the majority, they've paused, considered where they're at, reviewed the particular project in terms of its future pipeline. And for the most part, they have just gotten back on the horse and kept pushing forward. Certain projects in residential either on hold for the moment, but surprisingly, some are still forging forward with a lot of optimism.
When you say forging forward, you mean things that are beginning to settle, or building that's commencing, or planning, or across the board?
Well, in terms of the work that we do, whether it's place visioning or property marketing, we're right at the sort of early stages, meaning that the developers who are forging forward are still planning on releasing projects to the market in spring this year. So they're really using this time wisely to think more deeply about how to make the project as compelling as can be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how spring goes, because there might be some sort of green shoots of optimism coming back to the market by then, but whether it springs back, pardon the pun, straight back to where we were pre-pandemic will be really interesting to see.
Oh, I can't imagine that it'll be anything like that, but rather than it being absolutely nothing, it will be something. There will be projects being launched. Others that were planning to launch this year will hold back to 2021. There are certainly big moves in the commercial office market because for many of those, they're looking anything from 2 to 5 years out. So they really need to be forging forward anyway to be resolving some of those deals, which are actually setting them up for success in several years to come.
Yeah, which a couple of years' time will be an interesting time, I think, just given the clampdown that's going to happen on international arrivals and migration into the country and what kind of impact that's going to have, because that's really been propping up a lot of the property industry and the economy in general. So putting a stop on that is going to have really interesting repercussions over time.
Absolutely. But I think, where we're all at right now is, this idea of a new normal, figuring out how to approach the future in a way that we've never thought about in the past. So I think it'll actually inspire a lot of new thinking and creativity and probably a lot more entrepreneurialism. While it's easy to focus on the negatives that we're experiencing right now, I think we really have to take a more optimistic viewpoint of the opportunity that will actually come out of this.
Yes, exactly why we're here talking today. So I thought that we would have a conversation around 5 things that you suggest that people could be doing now and 5 things that they could also be avoiding to give people some inspiration. So why don't we jump right in? What do you recommend that people could be doing now to keep their projects progressing?
Well, I think in property, the standard issue that we're all confronted with every day is time and cost. So, if we're realizing better lending conditions with regard to interest rates, then, we have no choice than to slow down. Then what better opportunity to sort of spend double the time on every decision that we make? So, what better time to take a more clinical approach to ensuring the product we're taking to market and the approach that we're using is actually going to give us the best possible opportunities to succeed. Now, it's no surprise to say that this will be one of the most unique moments in our life, both personally and career-wise. So without all the daily distractions, I think we really need to make the most of that and rethink a better future for our businesses and our customers. How can we be more inspiring? And without selling, why will our market be increasingly attracted to our projects in future? What can we do now to prepare for when the market improves? And of course, it's going to change gradually, not overnight like it started. But this could be, the most creative opportunity for many people's career that they've ever been presented with. So the intelligence within our businesses or from our trusted consultants should be put to use brainstorming. Now's the time to figure out ways to make every project even better. We can plan to ensure success comes at the end of the coronavirus, or whether it's 2021 or not. And we can, use tools like our place visioning service to solve problems now and to actually come up with those better ideas to ensure that what we're delivering does result in better social and economic outcomes. One of the interesting topics that's being raised with me a lot in the last few weeks is DA and council approvals. It continues to be a frustration contrary to state government and federal government statements. But I'm really hoping that the standard angst about DA approvals from local councils will start to improve. Council's normal way of answering no before the question's even been asked is really under a lot of pressure from state and federal government. And what big government wants is action and momentum and people in jobs, and that requires approvals. So while some developments need to be stopped or improved because they're not great to start with, the reality is there is so much great quality development out there that needs to forge forward without the standard red tape, just for the sake of red tape. I thought I was going to touch on a category that I'm finding quite interesting at the moment, which is house and land. And particularly what's going on, it's really forcing me to think about this category because this is a great opportunity to rethink the way we approach it in this country. And post-coronavirus, there could be a real increase of consumer interest in buying into the suburbs, middle ring or outer ring, greenfields. And I think that people are kind of talking more and thinking more about the notion of space, perceived safety, and health. And so, nothing ever before this time has made us think of our homes as a refuge like it has right now. So I feel that people are going to invest more money and effort and time into making their homes their castle. But the problem we have is that most or many house and land developments are dog boring. They're terrible. They're just a replication of what we've always seen. And they're totally car dependent. So if we start to think about how do we include more amenity, how do we create a sense of urbanity and fine grain, it's going to make it easier to attract this potentially growing urban market looking to the fringes. And I think now is the best chance developers have ever had to innovate rather than assuming it's business as usual, because that just won't be enough.
And so what would you do to get rid of the cars?
Well, I'm not suggesting get rid of the cars, but I find that, in most greenfields master plan communities, there's not enough consideration for retail services, green space, parks. And so just to get the milk, people get in the car. So if we actually think about the way that we're designing these master plans and making them more walkable, I mean, I'm certainly not suggesting people don't have cars in these areas, because the reality is that public transport is still not good enough. But certainly, by actually thinking more about amenity across a master plan, we can actually help people have a healthier, more engaged, community-orientated life, and certainly change the notion that people who live in an urban central area might reconsider the value that comes with living out in the fringe.
Well, I don't think it's too far away from automated vehicles being maybe just part of the estate or the development. They get thrown in with the project, and they're for communal use by the people who live in the area.
Yeah, agree.
All right. What else have you got?
So, what are some things that people can do now during a period of uncertainty? Well, I would say that, the experience that we're all going through now has started to kind of deprioritize the distractions that we've probably all accepted in the past as being quite normal. And so I think one of the things we need to get better at is rethinking time management. So something that I would ask is that, what's something you've always wanted to do with your developments, but you felt you've never had the time? Did you want to do research? Did you want to talk to consumers? Did you want to actually internally test new ideas with your team and throw stuff around that you could actually ideate and be more progressive with? Because there's never been a better time than now. And I also think that we probably need to give a lot of consideration to changing markets. So while the residential focus has been on the owner-occupier market for the last 12 to 18 months, maybe even longer, I think we need to better understand the idiosyncrasies rather than trying to oversimplify markets, which people have a tendency to err towards. And an example of that maybe is like, if we think about residential off-the-plan sales, investors have been missing in the buyer mix for some time. And maybe this is an opportunity to kind of re-engage them. Now, I'm sure many people will disagree with me completely and assume that investors have never been harder to engage ever than they are right now. But I would sort of challenge that thought and say that the share market is incredibly volatile. It's creating constant fear and uncertainty. There's no value leaving cash in the bank. The interest rate's nothing. But actually, from a borrowing point of view, interest rates as low as they're ever going to get. And look, for the right asset and for cash-rich investors, borrowing from banks will be easy. They tick all the boxes. So I think our job is to figure out how to find them, how to engage them, and what we can do to draw them towards our developments, assuming that, what we have to offer actually meets that investor criteria. Something else.
Sorry to jump in there, Andy. I agree with you. I think there will need to be more focus on all the categories, all of your potential buyers. There'll need to be more effort put into understanding them and attracting them, because I think the buyer market will be shallower when the pandemic eases, and you really have to go hard after all your potential buyer markets. So yes, focusing on people like investors is a really good idea, even if it only ends up being a very small percentage of the total number of buyers that buy into your project. I just don't think people will be able to afford to be complacent with potential buyer markets.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because I think that one of the things we should be doing a lot more of is producing relevant content. Now, admittedly, I'm getting way too many emails of just junk. people who've got too much time on their hands to just write and write. And I'm certainly not suggesting more of that because it's kind of annoying. And I'm certainly not suggesting more marketing. So this is not about the sort of thing that, our firm would do. I think that there are fantastic experts out there in PR and social media that can really help win more future buyers by creating interesting and relevant content, and particularly where people have already been purchasers, just to update them in regard to where the project is at, what's its status, give them a sense of comfort, or otherwise, help customers make a decision about purchasing when the time's eventually right for them. So it's not about pressure. It's just about information, and it's not about over-communicating, and it's not about saying too much. I think it's also important when you're doing that to remind the market and customers how solid you are. We're being told that the bankruptcies that are going to occur in the next 12 months will be exponential, let alone job losses. But there are some incredible solid firms out there, not just the small and big ones, but ones that have been around for a long time. And it's interesting, I saw Stockland put something to the market yesterday about how strong their balance sheet is. And that really inspires confidence, with a broad range of stakeholders. And I mean, personally, I've been in business 29 years. I've been through 4 or 5 big downturns, from being smashed in the face during the GFC to the dot-com bubble to others. So, I have no concern about getting through this. Yeah, it's going to be tough for all of us, but, you just got to persevere. I think the final thing I'd probably throw into that is about, and probably on the same note really, is I just think you want to keep engaging with helpful, inspiring ways to kind of keep contact with people who have registered their interest or made a deposit. Use methods to illustrate to them that the kind of community or the lifestyle that they can look forward to being part of down the track. And so, things that are sort of coming out of the ground, consider doing things like private digital channels where, those purchasers can enjoy a cooking lesson with a local chef that's currently restaurant is not open. Take advantage of people in the area who might not be busy, whether they're gardeners or artsy folk or whatever. Hero local people. Do things that are actually entertaining, but actually make people feel like they're a part of a local collective or part of a local tribe.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to stay in touch, and people do want something inspiring at the moment and something to look forward to. So if they are planning on purchasing, and if you can provide that inspiration, then I think, yes, they'll be more likely to engage with you. But what about developers out there who are doing stuff in the suburbs, the middle ring? It might not be a project that is big enough to warrant a local chef or something like that. What's something that they could be doing?
Well, back to the point of just updating their purchases about where they're at. People drive past a site they bought from, and if they drive past and there are no builders there and nothing is happening, that creates fear. They've put a deposit down and they're starting to think, wow, this thing's never going to get completed. Now, their money is in an account that it's guaranteed to be returned if it doesn't go ahead. But if people have made that commitment, they're excited about moving in, if it's an occupier. So it's about mitigating fear. And, if you've got a small development in the middle ring suburb that is only a couple of dozen, then contact purchasers one-on-one. Don't do it as a mass email. Make it more personal.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You could even write them a letter, couldn't you? Just a little handwritten letter.
It's funny. I was actually saying to someone the other day that one of the things that I've been doing more of is just writing handwritten notes and cards because, while digital is fast, it doesn't have any lasting value. And a handwritten note is personal and therefore it has more value.
It must be the Australia Post delays in delivery from my card arriving in the post yet, Andy.
I haven't thought of any sort of sweet something to send you, mate.
Oh yeah, you're just working down alphabetically. You've only got down to E.
I don't know. I also think if you haven't got something really purposeful or meaningful to say, then just say nothing.
It's like a backhanded compliment there. Anyway, let's move on. Any other tips for what people can be doing?
Well, I think it's probably worth talking about the sort of things people should be avoiding doing right now too.
Yeah, let's move into that.
So I would say, look, don't just sit on things and then all of a sudden make them red hot urgent. Be reasonable, like manage expectations, both up and down the line. And, that also means not making people wait unnecessarily. Communicate with them, let them know where things are at. I mean, we're working with some awesome clients on some great projects. But I've got to say, we're also working with some organizations on projects where the only reason it's stalling is because some individuals are having problems with their own time management. And look, maybe they're trying to work from home, they're surrounded by kids, and that's got to be tough. There's probably a whole bunch of reasons why people are really struggling with time management. And so the concern that I have is that in some of the large organizations, I fear that what's being reported internally within their own company is probably blame being attributed to the consultants for a hold-up, when it's actually the consultant who's all over it and ready to go and doing anything they can to move it forward. But things are getting held up at the client end for whatever reason. And if that's the case, that's cool. Just admit it. Just be open. Communicate. These are super weird times. No one's going to get upset. But I would strongly advise people, don't try and pass the blame onto an innocent party, because you will get busted. The truth always comes out eventually.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with my own consultants at the moment isn't really, I'm not seeing massive delays with people turning stuff around.
Yeah, I think, at the consultant end, you're probably finding that people are more responsive than they've ever been before. I think that the thing that I'm seeing is some of the really large organizations, we're talking about hundreds or thousands of people, where it's easy to hide, where you're kind of reliant on an individual to keep something moving, but no returned emails, no returned phone calls. And then somebody else in the same team is kind of like, where is it? You're like, well, God, I've done it all. I'm just waiting for someone to approve it or give us some feedback. We actually can't move forward without that person. But at the same time, you don't want to bury them either, because the reality is that the strength of your business is the strength of your relationships. So you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place.
So, Andy, do you reckon that's just a magnification of how that individual may operate, and it's just been sort of brought to the fore because of the circumstances? Or do you think that it's just a result of the pressure and the environment?
I think for many people, it's just a result of the coronavirus. I think it's particularly difficult with parents and kids. Sometimes there might be a single parent at home. They might have 2 or 3 kids. And, all of us would have to appreciate that would be pretty overwhelming. Depending on the ages of the kids, there will be a hard home life situation to manage and balance.
Yes, well, I've got 2 kids who are homeschooling or remote learning, or however it wants to be described at the moment, that are patiently waiting outside the door at the moment. So I think it's lucky we haven't had an interruption so far, but fingers crossed. they've
I'm lucky.
Been pretty good.
I've been at the office every day since this has occurred, and our Sydney office is like 620 square meters. It's pretty big, and there's only 4 of us here, so we've pretty much got a corner of each of the building to ourselves. And I've loved riding my bike into work every day with no traffic, and it's actually been quite lovely, Yeah. So there's people like me who are actually getting some benefit out of what's going on.
Oh yes, there's always benefits in any situation, Andy. But what's next? What else can people avoid doing?
Look, I would say just avoid pessimism. This situation's not going to last forever. There's still a market out there. Spring could be a great time for a lot of projects. So let's just start preparing for it. But with that in mind, we've got to avoid sending out hard sales messages right now. They're just not going down well. People don't appreciate it. It's annoying. And, all the analytics are showing us that people are drawn to empathetic messaging. So it's quite vital, I think, that we adjust our communications and just play down the hardcore sales messages. I'd probably also suggest that we really are conscious about overspending in media. Let's use our own channels to communicate, even with our databases. And, however, with regard to paid media, let's figure out where the big discounts are. Who's doing deals? Where can we flex our buying power? I would suggest, I've got, 50, 60 staff, and we just let them do their thing. And I would suggest to others, don't check up on your staff. Give people trust. Let them perform. And, remember, for some of them, it's particularly difficult. So be passionate and be calm.
What about frequency of messaging or frequency of interaction, Andy? Got any advice
Well,
on how much is too much or how much is not enough?
I think that, when you've got sort of leaders in your business, they need to have a sense of who is or isn't being communicated with on a regular basis. And certainly in our case, whether it's studio managers or team leaders, they will know that, and they will make a point of reaching out just to check in with people who may have not been involved in a Zoom meeting. But I would say for the most part in our business, 90% of people are on a number of Zoom meetings a day or getting phone calls and are directly in contact with others. So for the vast majority of them, it's definitely not an issue. But you'll always find that there's a few people who just like to sort of work in isolation in the quiet, and they're quite happy doing that. But you don't want to assume that either. You've got to check in and see how people are going and understand their emotional state.
What about with your buyers and potential buyers?
Well, I think that, as I say, right now is not the time to focus on sales messages, but for the right sort of communication, if it's really considered, it will be appreciated. But I think we just need to be really conscious at what stage those buyers are at, and what stage that you're thinking of launching if you haven't launched already.
Very good.
So
Any
I
other
was
things to avoid?
Yeah, look, I was kind of thinking about the notion of a lot of developers are like, right, we do resi or we do commercial or we do retail. And I would say that if there was ever a time to avoid sticking to your knitting, it might be now. Like you might have made plans to focus on a particular sector that you've always focused on, but that sector might now be very weak and it might not be likely to come back in any meaningful way with regard to momentum for a few years. So maybe now's the time to pivot. Maybe you've always developed one asset class and now's the time to branch out. I was reading that the all-powerful build-to-rent sector in the USA is experiencing monumental pain because a third of the tenants around America are simply unable to pay their rent this month. And so that might be the case for some months to come. So it's just one example of a sector which might shift. And admittedly, I'm talking about the USA now, not the local market. But, developers there planning to do more BTR might actually move into another category. And so I probably think that means don't sit still. Now's a really time to get things done, to work ahead of the curve. And we all know in 6 months' time, most companies and people will regret not taking advantage of the time that they had right now to be productive, in what is, actually a great opportunity. So as I said, this is not going to last forever, as we all know. And the ones who are going to succeed at the outset of this are the ones who are working away furiously like nothing's happening at all. And they're going to be the businesses who are best placed in the industry in 6 to 18 months.
And so speaking of pivoting and potentially changing, you touched on planning. If you had something that was going through planning or maybe something that's been approved but you're going to take a look at it with a fresh set of eyes, what are the kind of things that you think people should be considering when they're looking at their plans now? Should they have confidence in what they were proposing, or do you think they should be looking at it with fresh eyes?
I think you have to look at everything with fresh eyes. I think every single market is going to change. Nothing will be the same. But it's not to say that they'll be worse either. Some markets, when they eventually come out of this, will actually be very strong. So it's not change for the sake of change, but it's certainly analysis and assessment of whatever it is you're doing to feel confident that that's the right approach to take. I think with some property categories, now is a great time to be actually thinking about what can I do that I don't think anyone else in the market is doing that will really get me some attention, that will be a great experience within the development or a piece of amenity, or is it the landscaping? Is it some architecture? Is it the story that I can tell that will actually bring people towards me when the time is right?
All right. Well, that all sounds good. So plenty of ideas there. But tell me, what have you learnt yourself or your own experience over the last couple of weeks? What's something that you've taken out of the experience?
Look, for me, I think that I am really grateful for the fact that I have been in business for 29 years because it's enabled me to be very calm. There's no hysteria with me, with, even some crazy shit that's happened in the last month. major projects we've been, preparing to start on, I kid you not, for 13 months have all of a sudden gone on hold. Work that we're doing in airports has all stopped. All our university work has stopped. There are certain areas that I don't see coming back to life again, maybe not even this year. So that's disappointing, but I'm just not letting anything get me down or make me feel pessimistic. But that's not necessarily because of just my personality, but it's actually because after 29 years, I know that things will come good again. I know that you just have to maintain a sense of consistency. I know that you have to engage your people. And I know that you've got to make very quick decisions. Just get on with it and make decisions. Don't wait around to think, I'll see what happens next. You don't know what's going to happen next. So make the decisions that you need to make now. And so, it's interesting because it's meant that we've started to think about what new or different things can we do.
Well, speaking of new or different things, have you been doing yourself anything new or different, apart from obviously working with less people?
Well, it's obviously having the team dispersed amongst all their homes in some way has been a really unexpected positive, because our offices, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, are now working more collaboratively than they've ever worked in the history of the business. Now we're, putting teams together more so on almost every single job where there might be someone from a different office collaborating in a way they never have before. So that's been a phenomenal outcome. It's been something I've been wanting to happen for many, many years, but I don't know whether it's cultural or, it just hasn't come together, but that's going to be something that'll be a lasting benefit for our business, the right person with the right skill and the right job, regardless of where they happen to be in whichever state. From a marketing perspective, we've been doing Instagram live sessions. We're quite keen to keep conversations around place going and property marketing. We really kind of want to talk to the broader industry and talk to people about how they can adapt and answer people's questions. We're about to launch our virtual place tours. This is a series of narrated video tours of best-in-class placemaking and place visioning projects, which we've been putting together at the moment. And it's a combination of pictures and storytelling, and it uses our own research plus footage that I've taken or our team have taken, and some images that we've created. And we think that'll be kind of a unique thing to share in the market. Probably the toughest thing has been running workshops via Zoom. I'm talking about, it could be anything from 10 people to 20-something people. And it's not easy when, there might be a group of clients and consultants from 2 to maybe even 5 other companies in digital attendance. But I kind of, having done these a few times now, once you kind of understand how to engage people differently and manage their contribution differently and actually set rules at the beginning of these sessions, you can really get people contributing. And actually, I've been able to make them work really productively. It does mean hosting the process quite differently than ever before. And it is actually harder. It's certainly not easier. But, you can get people to kind of contribute in a session that maybe in the past some of them would have hidden away. In a room, they might have said nothing and just sort of sat in the corner. But now I'm probably more inclined to go looking for them and actually question them on topics just to make sure everyone's perspective is being tabled. So there are definitely pros and cons, and I've learned a lot about how to make that productive. And I think probably a very similar thing goes to brainstorming, where we're talking about getting our team, the Hoyne team together to generate ideas on a project. And on the plus side, interestingly with that, if anyone's got an idea, they simply just put it up on screen, they Google it or they find it on the computer, all of a sudden it's instantly there. Whereas in the old days, a month ago, we would be, in a room and someone would have to go back to the computer, find it, print it out, bring it back into the room, stick it on the wall. And so it probably didn't really happen. People just talk through it because we didn't want to break the momentum. But now, we can just flip around whoever wants to control the screen and quickly put something up. And that continues the conversation in terms of ideation. And so what I've really surprisingly found is there's real benefits to this process, which never existed before. That ability to load images or references or put plans up on immediately or just share a video or an instantaneous thought. For me, that's been a real boon.
Yeah, and just going back to your point around virtual tours, I think there's a real opportunity there, because I think that a lot of the tours, the video walkthroughs, get done in this country are very lackluster, and I think there's a real opportunity to make them far more exciting and interesting. To engage people in those virtual, whether it's a video walkthrough or a virtual reality tour, I just think they can be a lot more interesting and exciting and engaging for the viewer.
Whenever I go anywhere, and I go looking for great places, whether we worked on them or I just think they're impressive. And so I'm always taking a lot of video just off my phone. And the team was saying a few weeks ago, wow, we've got so much cool video that, we've taken through various places we've never shown anybody. It's just sitting there. We just got this pile of video. So now's been a great opportunity for us with our video team to start to edit all that and put it together so we can actually put it to use and share it and actually share the insights. It's funny when you actually kind of look under the bonnet, sometimes you're surprised by how many assets you have sitting there unused.
Yes, well, you did a trip to New York, I think, to have a look at some projects there, and I guess New York is probably one of those leading places in the world when it comes to projects and placemaking. If there's one thing that you could take from New York and how they do developments, what would it be?
This is going to surprise you because it has nothing to do with marketing. The big difference between a place like New York and many other parts of the world is that for a lot of the projects that I've looked at, they actually don't have any bank funding. The cash just comes from their back pocket. These are incredibly wealthy organizations or individuals who don't have millions, they have trillions, or at least billions. And, the idea that they can actually develop their thinking and go to market without being fixated on, achieving pre-sales just to get their bank funding or whatever funding support mechanism they've got in place. That's quite unique, and it's certainly not something I've ever seen occur in Australia. I guess it also means that there is an ability by some of these people who I've met on these trips that they go with their gut. It's less about what they think the broader market is doing and more about their view on how they want to lead the market. That obviously takes a huge amount of confidence and a lot of money to sort of support that initiative. But it certainly results in best of category outcomes that it's not surprising that they occur in New York.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with their market. They've been very badly hit by Corona, so hopefully they can all bounce back quickly and start producing awesome projects again. Now, I wanted to ask you, we've all got a little bit more extra time on our hands or we're looking for things to do. I know you're a well-read man, or have you got a book or a documentary or a movie, something that you could recommend to people?
Sure. Probably the thing that I've just seen recently, which just makes me laugh just thinking about it, was a TV series on Netflix called The Kaminsky Method. It's so funny, so poignant. It's about a famous acting coach and his longtime agent. And, they just laugh at the curveballs that life throws them. And it actually stars Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin, two pretty sort of famous actors. But it's just hilarious. It's just one short series. I think they're only 30-minute episodes, but I'd strongly recommend that. I'm probably reading, I'm always reading a lot of books, and sometimes I reread some of the same books. But a couple of books that I'm going through at the moment that might really interest people is one by Peter Elliard called Destination 2050. Now, Peter is quite an interesting futurist. So, no one predicted the coronavirus, and I'm certainly not suggesting Peter did, but interesting to kind of read his view on the future. And I wonder how much the coronavirus has on Peter's viewpoint in terms of maybe publishing a revised edition. I think that he's got some really good ideas. Another book that I read last year was by Professor Ed Blakely and Richard Yu called Crafting Innovative Places, and that's definitely a great book worth a read. And another book that you would not expect somebody in place branding, place visioning and property marketing to read is a book that I'm into called Public Infrastructure and Private Finance. I kind of have a strong view that I need to know as much as I can about all aspects of property, not just the area that I contribute from. And that's a book by Demetrio Munoz Gillen and Erwin van der Krabben, and it's definitely worth a read. One of the best books I've ever read in business, and I suggest that everyone read it if they have not, It's by Ray Dalio. It's called Principles, Life and Work. Ray's one of the most successful business people and one of the wealthiest people in the world. And he has some incredible insights on, the way he approaches life and work. And there's some fantastic insights and good ideas in there. The School of Life do a great series of books. And if you haven't read one, get your hands on one. There's always some great content to really make you rethink about the way that you approach life. And then finally, if you haven't read Volume 2 of The Place Economy, just get online and order one. People always complain it's a bloody big, thick book. It's got about 80 articles in it. It's pretty substantial, but if there was ever a time to get into it and enjoy, it's right now.
Well, it is full of nice, pretty pictures, though, Andy.
Yeah, it's, what is it? I think I've forgotten. I think it's 560 pages. It's got 60,000 words, but I think it also has about 800 images. So, yeah, it's pretty content rich.
Yeah, look, both those volumes are actually quite good reading because they're just short case studies, so you can kind of read one in bed before you go to sleep, and they're full of lots of ideas of what people are doing around the world. So that's good bedtime reading, or just flicking through when you got 10-15 minutes. Any parting words of wisdom, ideas, comments?
I think I would just remind people again, be collaborative, stay optimistic, know that this will pass, use the time to actually innovate and be creative. You'll never get a chance like this again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long it lasts. So where can people go to find out more about you or about Hoyne?
Look, just jump on our website, Hoyne, hoyne.com.au. It has access to the Place Economy and all of our kind of content.
Awesome. Well, Andrew Hoyne, thanks once again for being on the Property Developer Podcast and sharing your insights on what people can do during this strange period of time. So obviously from your point of view, it's an opportunity and people should get cracking on looking at their business and seeing what opportunities they can find.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for being on the show again.
My pleasure, anytime.
You've been listening to the Property Developer Podcast. Tune in next time for more tips, ideas and inspiration to take your developing to the next level. For more developing love, make sure to visit propertydeveloperpodcast.com.